Let's say Abel wishes to purchase widgets from Baker. Our baseline assumption, all other things being equal, is that the buyer and seller, Abel and Baker, are in the best position to establish an efficient price for this transaction. Baker knows what it cost him to make the widgets. Abel knows what the widgets are worth to him and what he is willing to give up to buy them. Abel and Baker therefore can negotiate a contract for this transaction. Over time, other suppliers may offer widgets at competing prices, and a competitive market will develop. Suppliers may also begin to innovate with different widget designs or with alternative products to compete with widgets. From an economic perspective, the primary role of the law in this simple example is to provide stable rules for property and contracts, which allow the efficient private market to flourish. The setting of prices based on supply and demand accounts for all the costs and benefits of widget sales. But let's say Baker's method of manufacturing widgets involves the creation of air pollutants. The air pollutants affect Kane, who lives in a house near the factory. Kane's health is damaged and the value of her home is lowered because of the pollution. Now there is a cost external to the transaction between Abel and Baker, which is not captured in the price Abel pays Baker. This is an externality. The market is not really efficient because Abel and Baker are imposing costs on Kane that are not reflected in the underlying transaction and for which Kane receives no benefit. Here, it can make economic sense for the law to step in and require Abel and Baker to internalize the externality. If Baker is fined under an environmental law restricting pollution emissions, for example, that cost will be passed on in the price to Abel, and the social cost-benefit equilibrium will be restored. If the cost of a fine is high enough, it might be cheaper for Baker to relocate the factory or to innovate less polluting methods of manufacture. In addition to regulatory fines, the law can compel parties to internalize externalities through taxes, tort liability, and other means. These direct means of legal regulation, in turn, incentivize private actors to spread the risk of liability through insurance. Insurance provides a safety net both to the regulated entity that might face liability as well as to an injured party who needs compensation for harm. And because insurers want to keep their costs down, the insurance underwriting process improves compliance. The example of air pollution relates to negative externalities. A transaction can also produce positive externalities. For example, many cars today come with sophisticated accident avoidance systems. A buyer might be willing to pay a premium for a car with such a system because the buyer's own property and life is less likely to be damaged by an accident. At the same time, the buyer's car is less likely to damage another driver's property or life. This means the cost the buyer incurs for this extra safety measure benefits both the buyer and others, a positive externality. While negative externalities suggest a need for government penalties, taxes, or liability, positive externalities suggest an economic case for a public subsidy or mandate. The government might defray some of the private costs of a collision avoidance system through a subsidy, or it might mandate that all cars manufactured after a certain date must employ such a system. The overall cost is spread across the public through taxes, a form of public insurance. Public health entails significant externalities